This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Lina Moudou in for Esther Gitui-Ewart. It's Thursday, July 25th. This is Africa 54. Ethiopia's Supreme Court. 15 West African nations agreed to adopt a single currency by 2020. We'll analyze the challenges. And meet this year's winner of the U.S. Capitol's Jollof Rice competition. We'll have those stories in a moment. But first, for the second time this month, as Sudan's ruling military council says it has foiled an attempted coup and arrested senior army officers and politicians for their part in the alleged plot to restore the party of ousted former President Omar al-Bashir to power. The military revealed Wednesday the coup attempt involved General Hashim Abdel Muttalib Ahmed, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a number of high-ranking officers from the armed forces and the National Intelligence and Security Services. The attempted takeover also included leaders of the National Congress Party and the Islamic Movement Party that al-Bashir headed. It remains unclear exactly when the alleged coup attempt occurred, but the military says it had been monitoring the failed behind-the-scenes regime change in recent weeks and was now uncovering the details of the thwarted scheme. Officials in Somalia say a suspected al-Shabaab suicide bomber triggered explosives at the mayor's office in Mogadishu, killing 6 people and wounding 6 others, including the mayor. Wednesday's attack occurred only minutes after a visit from the United Nations new envoy to Somalia, James Swan. The terrorist group is claiming responsibility for the attack. Authorities are investigating how the bomber breached security. The al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab often targets government buildings, such as the presidential palace and other high-profile parts of Mogadishu, with its bombings. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, as part of his sweeping reforms, has appointed Meaza Ashenafi to be the first woman to lead the country's Supreme Court. A charismatic lawyer, Ashenafi has built a career advocating for women. VOA's Salem Salomon has a profile.
Meaza Ashenafi made a name for herself fighting for women's rights in Ethiopia. Her most famous case involved a 14-year-old girl who was kidnapped by a man trying to force her into child marriage, a traditional practice in some parts of Ethiopia. The girl shot and killed her abductor, but was cleared of charges due to Meaza's work. The incident was dramatized in an award-winning film, Difret. Meaza is now Chief Justice of Ethiopia's Supreme Court, the first woman ever appointed, and will remain focused on women's rights and economic empowerment.
For example, in Ethiopia, there is no law, independent law on violence against women. We just have few provisions in the criminal code. So going forward, I think we need to have a comprehensive law that addresses issues of violence against women and law.
Meaza founded the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association to help women who've been sexually harassed or victims of intimate partner violence. She says she wants to restore the people's trust in the nation's legal system, which has been criticized for its slow response to crime. The career lawyer wants Ethiopians to see the courts are able to hold everyone to account, including those in power. Meaza seems to have an ally in Ethiopia's young, reform-minded Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed.
Everyone should get equal treatment in the face of the law. It should never be used as a tool for revenge. When we respect the rule of law, it should be in accordance to that.
Meaza hopes her understanding of Ethiopia's culture and people will be an asset in her position as she seeks solutions to seemingly intractable problems.
If under my leadership we manage to cement the independence of the judiciary in Ethiopia, This is not going to change the history of the last 40 years. This is going to change the history of the last 3,000 years of judicial administration in Ethiopia.
Salim Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
Tunisia has declared 7 days of mourning following the death Thursday of its president, Beji Caid Essebsi. He was the country's first democratically elected leader and became head of state after the Arab Spring uprising. Essebsi helped draft a new democratic constitution guaranteeing fundamental rights such as freedom of speech and preparing Tunisia for free elections. He was one of the world's oldest leaders. Essebsi died in a hospital at the age of 92. South Sudanese technology firms have launched the country's first mobile money transfer platform, mGurush. It allows customers to pay for goods and services across the nation, similar to platforms in Kenya and other African countries. While a 2018 peace deal allowed for the service to be rolled out across the country, there are still infrastructure challenges. Sheila Pony reports from Juba.
South Sudan celebrated a rare advance in technology this month as the world's youngest country launched a nationwide system for mobile money transfers. The new service, called mGurush, M for mobile and Grush for money in Arabic, removes the need for a bank account, which most South Sudanese lack.
The real aim and the real success of mobile money is in targeting the low incomes and our rural population. Those are the real people that we want to bring them and include them into the financial systems.
South Sudan's Minister of Information demonstrated the ease of use by purchasing a cow with his mobile phone. He says it will take time for rural South Sudanese to trust cashless payments.
You have a very big task to do. You need to sensitize the people of South Sudan, including me. You need to sensitize the people of South Sudan on this mGurush, because it is not enough.
Ravaged by years of war and conflict, South Sudan is racked by poverty and has one of Africa's lowest rates of mobile phone penetration, just 21%.
One of the biggest challenges is network coverage, because as we all know, after the war, a lot of telecom infrastructure was destroyed. Okay, so especially most of the telecom infrastructure in the villages.
But one of the South Sudanese companies behind mGurush, Zain Telecommunication, is confident that mobile money is just the beginning of a new era.
We know that the fiber is at the corner. It's just almost to this town, to Juba, where this country will be connected through fiber.
Mobile money is expected to speed up trade and add thousands of new jobs to South Sudan's struggling economy. It also puts South Sudan in the ranks of other East African nations using mobile money, such as Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. Sheila Pony for VOA News, Juba.
The Economic Community of West African States has just revived an old dream, adopting a single currency across member states. The planned shared currency, called the ECO, is expected to launch in 2020. The idea was first introduced at the turn of the millennium, but the target launch date was postponed several times. It's hoped the ECO will boost economic development and improve cross-border trade in the region. Here to discuss the new currency is Amadou Alim Bai. He is a professor of economics at Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal. He is also a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution here in Washington, D.C. Professor Mbai, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Help us to understand the ECO and its significance in the West African region once it is launched.
Yeah, the ECO, once it is launched, will become the one single currency for all ECOWAS countries. ECOWAS is a regional organization encompassing 15 West African countries.
Yes.
And up to now, we have one currency zone, which is the CFA in West Africa, because we have two CFA, one in West Africa, one in Southern Africa. And this is coexisting with other currencies, mostly from Anglophone countries. These Anglophone countries have organized themselves in what we call West African Monetary Zone, but it doesn't preclude each of them until now having its own currency.
So one of the big questions is the fact that there are criteria, and they have a target of 2020. How realistic is this target, especially given that there are criteria and not all countries are at the same level economically?
Yeah, first let me start by saying that given the high concentration of small countries in West Africa, it might make sense for governments to try to pool resources through harnessing regional integration. But there is a near consensus among economists that governments are just moving this agenda too far and too fast. Because for such a project to become reality and to work, to function as expected, we would need some prerequisite. For example, we would expect economic structure to be somewhat identical. And we need expect policies to be somewhat harmonized. And neither of these is happening in West Africa right now. For example, if you take the case of resource endowment, a country like Nigeria is oil exporting, while most others are oil importing. And this makes a big difference in terms of economic policy. And number two, as I mentioned earlier, you have a set of countries which are already using the same currency, and which are harmonizing policies in many regards, and cohabitating with countries like Liberia, Nigeria, Ghana, having their own currencies and facing very often important macroeconomic challenges. So you have this coexistence
so there are many loopholes and many challenges. Now, what interest do countries, a economic giant like Nigeria, has to really take part in this?
Look, that is also a very big challenge, because Nigeria alone makes up 2/3 of the countries, I mean the region's GDP, and almost a similar share I mean, in population. And if you look at foreign trades, Nigeria makes up more than 25% of the region's foreign trade. So if you have ambitious integration agenda like this happening, it will mean that Nigeria is likely to be leading the whole process. And how easy it will be for example, Francophone African countries, which have been used to, I mean, being together, getting along for such a long time, and harmonizing policies, follow these Nigeria stance, I mean, leadership. It will be complicated.
And we're going to end very quickly, but I wanted you to give your thought briefly on the CFA, because people have complained over the years that the CFA was colonial, a kind of a colonial still oppression, if you will, economic oppression. So how realistic will the ECO be a breakaway from the CFA?
Oh, at least the ECO will break these long-term tie between France and its former colony. But here is not the most important challenge. I think it would be a mistake for Africans to keep thinking that currency is a symbol of sovereignty.
We have to leave it there, Professor Mbai. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right back after the break. Wait 1 second.
Could be French,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. A South African man is the first person from his country to win the Royal Academy of Engineering's Africa Prize, after designing a smart locker system which dispenses medicines to patients with chronic illnesses. Pele Box was created by electrical engineer Neo Hutiri, who developed the technology after realizing patients were spending too much time in line, waiting to collect medicines at healthcare facilities. The lockers are stocked with prescription drugs placed there by health workers. Patients then receive a notification on their phones and use an ATM-like machine and a PIN to access the medicine. Last year, South Africa launched a similar vending machine called the ATM Pharmacy that also gives out medicines in public hospitals. Next up, French inventor Frankie Zapata demonstrated his jet-powered flyboard in the north of France on Wednesday, just one day before attempting a flight across the English Channel. A former jet ski champion, Zapata became known as the Flying Soldier when he showed off his invention before the world's media at France's annual Bastille Day military parade on July 14th. Unfortunately, Zapata's attempt to become the first man to cross the Channel on a flyboard failed when he crashed while trying to land on a refueling station in the middle of the Channel. Zapata's attempt was set to coincide with the 110th anniversary of the first ever flight across the English Channel in an airplane, achieved by Louis Blériot. And finally, a U.S. company that manufactures flamethrowers as agricultural tools has released a drone flamethrower attachment. Throwflame, based in Ohio, says the TF-19 Wasp is designed for remote ignition of aerial and ground targets, such as controlled agriculture clearance and nest elimination. Other uses for flamethrowers include melting and clearing of ice and snow, and controlled burns for forest fire containment and prevention. It can shoot a stream of fire up to 7 meters and holds 4.5 liters of fuel, enough for 100 seconds of firing time. And that's what's trending today.
A U.S. federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction blocking a 10-day-old rule by the administration of President Donald Trump that made migrants ineligible for asylum if they pass through another country en route to the United States and failed to apply for protection in that country. In his ruling, Judge John Tigar of the Northern District of California says Congress has made it possible to bar asylum to applicants who had an alternative, safe option in another country, but required that there be reasonable assurance the person wouldn't suffer harm or persecution there. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday refused to block the rule, saying migrant advocacy groups that challenged the regulation failed to show how they would be immediately harmed by the rule. The Trump administration is expected to appeal the ruling in the injunction blocking the measure. Former Special Counsel Robert Mueller told members of the U.S. Congress Wednesday that his probe into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election did not exonerate President Donald Trump of allegedly trying to thwart the investigation, as VOA's Mike O'Sullivan reports. Mueller's comments before two congressional committees drew very different responses from Republicans and Democrats.
The former special counsel warned of Russian attempts to sway the election in favor of Donald Trump through social media and WikiLeaks data breaches.
First, our investigation found that the Russian government interfered in our election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Second, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired with the Russian government in its election interference activities.
Mueller says investigators decided the president could not be charged for possible offenses as long as he's in office, based on long-standing Justice Department policy, but that the findings do not exonerate Trump.
And your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Trump calls the investigation a witch hunt, and he and many supporters are skeptical that the Russians swayed the election.
Given your 22 months of investigation, tens of millions of dollars spent, and millions of documents reviewed, did you obtain any evidence at all that any American voter changed their vote as a result of Russians' election interference?
I'm not going to speak to that.
You can't speak to that? After 22 months of investigation, there's not any evidence in that document before us that any voter changed their vote because of their interference, and I'm asking you based on all of the documents that you reviewed.
That was outside our purview.
Many Democrats praised the former special counsel.
Your report, for those who have taken the time to study it, is methodical and it is devastating. For it tells the story of a foreign adversary's sweeping and systematic intervention in a close U.S. presidential election.
In other words,
Republicans called Mueller's appearance political theater.
I'm hopeful that the Democrats on our committee will realize that the American people are losing, have lost what little faith they had in this report. And this report now can move on. We can actually start solving things like immigration and other things.
Mueller says that Russian meddling continues ahead of the 2020 U.S. election. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Jollof rice is one of the most common dishes in West Africa, and over the years there has been constant debates over which country serves the best jollof rice. The debate was finally settled here in Washington, D.C. recently during the 2019 jollof competition won by Sierra Leone. Yes, Sierra Leone. Carol Mabinti Kanu is owner of Mabin's Kitchen Catering and winner of the 2019 U.S. jollof rice competition in the region, held by Afropolitan Insights. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you are the big winner. How does this make you feel?
I mean, I'm honored, not only because this is not about Mabin's Kitchen or myself, this is me representing an entire nation. And so that is, to me, it's an honor, and it's been an overwhelming feeling.
So there's been this big debate about the best jollof rice. Who has the best jollof rice? I have to be honest with you. I have a soft spot for Senegal's jollof rice. However, you won this prize, and you have this meal here. It smells so good. I'm going to taste it. Maybe you will change my mind today. So how many people competed in this?
I believe about 5 people, but the final 4, it was final 4 that went to the final.
Yes, because when I read about this competition, there were hundreds of people who really applied to compete. So you did well. Congratulations. And now, did you win because Sierra Leone has the best jollof rice, or do you have a secret ingredient?
I mean, both of it, of course, but most importantly, this win, it was a blind taste win. Okay. So none of we didn't present our jollof based on our countries. It was based on colors, so it could be fair.
Okay.
So it's definitely taste, and yes, Sierra Leone.
So talk to us about jollof rice. What makes this staple dish so big of a deal in West Africa?
Well, for the most part, I think it's the creativity that it takes. Well, as you can see, there's different various, types of jollof rice. Yes. And it's just the different combination of things that you put in there to make sure that this rice has a specific flavor that, it just mouth-watering.
It is mouth-watering, and yes. I'm going to taste it. I will be your next judge and tell you.
Yes.
This is delicious. And look at this. It's beautifully made. What do you have in here?
Well, right there's the stew, which is what Sierra Leone jollof, for the most part, we always have a little stew with like different meats on top of it. That's what you see there with the jollof rice at the bottom.
So I see rice, meat, tomato, obviously.
Of
and
course.
it's a little spicy the way I like it, really. I mean, it's really delicious. I'm not saying this to flatter you. I can understand why you want.
Thank you.
So tell us, how much time does it take to make something like this?
Jollof rice, for the most part, would take about preparation and all. It'll take about an hour and a half. An hour and a half. Also depending on the volume, too.
And how did you learn to make it? Your mom, your grandma?
Yes, my mother. I mean, I come from a very traditional household. Every day there's dinner ready, and my dad is big on, as females, I have to be in the kitchen and help my mother out. So from watching her over the years, and you know, incorporating what I see here as well. So the two, I mean, it's. I just started cooking.
Down generations.
Yes.
So you have a catering business. Talk to us about how the ups and downs of running such a business.
Well, with me being young to begin with, and I still have my career, and I still have to divide myself into all of these things and trying to manage an entire catering business.
Okay. So this is not full-time. You do it on the side.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it's very challenging for the most part. And then management, of course, finding out the right staff and making sure that the customers are satisfied, which is the biggest thing. I mean, it's very challenging, but I pulled it through.
You pulled it through, and you did so well in the... tell us about the significance of this prize and what kind of impact you will see in your business.
And like I said earlier, the most significant part of it is that I'm representing an entire nation.
Yes.
And it started off as, this is the third one, actually, in D.C. But for some reason, I guess because Sierra Leone is such a small population here.
Okay.
So being that the underdog just came from nowhere, and then you have Nigeria and Ghana, who's been battling the entire time, and we just came from nowhere based on taste and just took the title. So.
I know usually it's Nigeria, Ghana, the big countries, and Liberia, but you did so well. The food is good. I mean, really, I can understand why you won.
Thank
Carol,
you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on this wonderful meal that I will continue to eat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that was Carol Mabinti Kanu. She's owner of Mabin's Kitchen Catering and winner of the 2019 Washington, D.C. Jollof Competition. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening and bon appetit.